We acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of New Credit, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat Nation. A Psalm of David. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I bear pain in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all day long? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? Consider and answer me, O Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep the sleep of death. And my enemy will say, I have prevailed, for my foes will rejoice, because I am shaken. But I trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord, because he has dealt bountifully with me. Yeah, yeah, way, way higher. Yeah, yeah, way, way higher. Way higher, way higher. Way higher, way higher. Yeah, way, way higher, way higher, way higher. Yeah, yeah, way, way higher. Yeah, yeah, way, way higher. Way higher, way higher. Way higher, way higher. Yeah, way, way higher, way higher, way higher. Yeah, yeah, way, way higher. Yeah, yeah, way, way higher. Way higher, way higher. Way higher, way higher. Yeah, way, way higher, way higher, way higher. Yeah, yeah, way, way higher. Yeah, yeah, way, way higher. Way higher, way higher. Way higher, way higher. Yeah, way, way higher, way higher, way higher.
A reading from the Gospel according to Matthew, the 10th chapter, beginning at the 40th verse. Whoever welcomes you welcomes me. Whoever then welcomes me through you welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet in the name of a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. And whoever welcomes a righteous person in the name of a righteous person will receive the reward of the righteous. And whoever is given a cup of cold water, whoever gives a cup of cold water to one of those little ones in the name of a disciple, truly I tell you, none of these will lose their reward. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the people. Thanks be to God.
I want to tell you a story about pride. This photo was taken of me at the Trans March in Toronto, a couple of years after I was ordained. I love this picture because in it I'm exuberant, I'm full of joy, and I remember being so proud to be able to stand in my community and show them that God's love was for everyone. But of course, like all stories, that's not where this one begins. When I was 17, I went on a camping trip with my parents. I was living in a small town, and my girlfriend at the time, who was from Toronto, came along with us. But we weren't out to my family. And I remember at one point my mom saying something about how it seemed like we should have been at the Pride parade in Toronto that weekend. I denied it and had no idea what she was talking about. But when my parents took my brothers on a hiking trip, my girlfriend quickly grabbed the Toronto Star and opened it to the center section and showed me a huge 7-page spread all about the Pride events in Toronto. I was totally blown away. I had no idea that there were other queer people, and certainly not that there was a celebration. I was ashamed of who I was and convinced that I would probably not live to see my 20th birthday. In that article, there was a piece about the Toronto Pride Prom, an event that is organized by SOY, or Supporting Our Youth. I was determined that I would go. The following year I did go. And the year after that, I was even crowned prom king. For a small town queer kid from rural Ontario, this was amazing. I had no idea that I would ever be held up and celebrated in a community of people who were like me. Unfortunately, the following year, I had to move to Toronto on a bus at 4 a.m. because I was gay bashed out of my hometown. I came to Toronto and I lived on the streets and I slept in shelters and in squats. But that's also where I met the queer community at its fullest. Unfortunately, it was also that year when I was taken to a youth evangelism conference in upstate New York, and I was held in a room for 8 hours against my will with a number of youth pastors and members of an ex-gay ministry. And it was in that room that I was told I was going to hell, that I had disappointed everybody, that the reason that my life was not turning out the way I wanted was because I was a sinner. And I walked out of that room, and I walked away from the church, and I walked away from God. Pride continued. I attended and I met new people, and it became what we nicknamed Gay Christmas, the time of year when our whole LGBT family came together and celebrated. Over the years, my life changed. I had babies. I took them to Pride with me. And I also got to witness how Pride, which had started as a protest in Toronto against the bathhouse raids, took on more and more politics to make sure that those of us who were the most marginalized were stood up for. This photo was taken the week after the G20, when so many of my community members had been incarcerated at the hands of police, abused, assaulted, and yet still came out in droves to celebrate who we are as a community. This photo was taken the year that we first sat down in support of Black Lives Matters. This was a photo of my partner, who at the time was a friend from church camp. I had no idea when that picture was taken that later we would live together and be raising kids. I love that Pride is a time for my entire family to come out and celebrate who we are. Even my daughters go, and our grandchildren now. And now I even get to celebrate with my extended family. Exactly 20 years after that first Pride prom, when I was crowned prom king, I got to go back to the Pride prom, but this time as a chaperone. And it was amazing to watch another generation of youth, many of whom came from homes that weren't accepting and from smaller communities. Yet still they gathered and they danced and they were goofy and silly and all the things that we had been as teenagers. And they were proud of who they were. Each year I show up at Pride, I make sure that at least one of the marches has me in my clergy collar. It's so important for me to be able to stand in my own community and to tell them that they are worthy of God's love, that they are worthy of dignity and respect. Every single year there are protesters who show up at the Pride Parade with signs telling us that we are going to hell. And every year, inevitably, there is some young, newly out queer kid who gets caught up in an argument with them. Oftentimes, I step into that conversation and I speak not to the protesters, but to that young kid to tell them that they are loved more than they will ever know and to offer them a hug if they want it. And every year, I get to hug a young queer kid and cry together, because for so many of them, it's the first time that they've heard that they still have a place in God's world and that they still have a place in the church. I'm blessed because my colleagues are committed to making sure that Two-Spirit and LGBT people are loved and valued and represented at the forefront of our ministry. I'm also blessed because now, 25 years after I first came out, I don't have to hide who I am. I don't have to hide my family, my sexuality, my gender identity, or that I'm Two-Spirit. This last fall, I had a startling reminder of the brutal injustices that LGBT people have faced throughout history. I was in Amsterdam on a work trip, and I visited the Homo Monument. There are 3 triangles, one on the street, one on the canal, and one raised from the road. The one on the canal is often where floral wreaths are laid. After the Pulse shooting in Orlando, the entire monument was covered with flowers. And I think that this speaks to the point that this monument not only honors those around the Netherlands, but around the world, and that when one group of people is in pain, our entire worldwide community feels it. The alignments of the 3 points of the triangle are symbolic. One points towards the National War Memorial on Dam Square, and the second points toward the headquarters of the COC Nederland, the Dutch gay rights group founded in 1946, which makes it the oldest continuously operating gay and lesbian organization in the world. The third triangle points towards the house of Anne Frank, the Jewish girl who was deported to her death by the Nazis. Anne Frank, who despite mentioning her attraction to other females in her diaries, had those parts erased and removed when it was published because people were afraid that she wouldn't be held up as the hero that she was if people found out that she was a lesbian. This monument spoke so much to me because it reminded me of the atrocities faced at the hands of the Nazis as gay and lesbian and trans people were marched into concentration camps to their deaths. And yet we have history repeating itself as Black and Indigenous people, especially those of sexual and gender minorities, are targeted by the police and still killed by the state. Our reading today from Matthew reminds us that God's love is always with us if we take care of those who are around us, if we give water to even the smallest. My friends, for so long, the Two-Spirit and LGBT community has been treated like the smallest, like the most unimportant, like those whose lives don't need to be valued. But that's not God's covenant with his people. God's covenant with his people is that no matter what we do, no matter who we are, and no matter who we love, nothing can separate us from the love of God. Pride this year feels different. Right now, I should be out at a march celebrating my community, hugging the people I haven't seen for so long. And it's a lot quieter. I'm home with my family, celebrating love in other ways. But my friends, know that pride was never meant to be normalized. Pride was never meant to be corporate. Pride was never meant to be only about the beer gardens and the celebrations. Pride has always been political. Pride started from a police riot. Pride in Toronto started after the bathhouse raids. And so pride is about how we live our lives every single day. It's about being out when it's safe for us to be. It's about setting an example for other people. It's about loving ourselves as much as God loves us. And so I know that this year feels weird. I know it feels different. But pride will happen again. And we will get to go out and be close to one another and dance together. But in the meantime, think about how you as a Two-Spirit or LGBT person, or as an ally to our community, can make changes to ensure that we don't need another Homo monument like in the Netherlands, that we don't need to keep adding on to what we're fighting for because more and more injustice has been happening in the world. Make sure that as faithful followers of Christ, the atrocities that have been committed towards the 2LGBT community in the name of God stop happening. I'm lucky. I found my community. I found abundant amounts of love, and I found a church community that was accepting of me exactly where I was. But not all of our youth are that lucky. We need to create a culture that shows what Matthew was writing to the followers of Jesus, that we have to look out for those around us, that we have to offer water when water is needed, and that we have to live out God's message of abundant love. My friends, know that no matter what, you are loved, that you are valued, that your relationships are important, that your love has been blessed by God, however that's expressed. And know that again in the future, we will gather together in community to celebrate, to dance, and to stand up for those who are around us. May you be blessed. May you be full of love. And may you be assured that God's promise is for all of us. Amen.
Yeah, yeah, way higher. Yeah, yeah, way higher. Way higher, way higher. Way higher, way higher. Yeah, way high, way high, way high. Oh. Yeah, yeah, way higher. Yeah, yeah, way higher. Way higher, way higher. Way higher, way higher. Yeah, way high, way high. Way high, oh. Yeah, yeah, way higher. Yeah, yeah, way higher. Way higher, way higher. Way higher, way higher. Yeah, way high, way high. Way high, oh.
Let us pray. God, when you called each of us into being, you delighted in your works. You gifted us with differences that illuminate the breadth of beauty, wisdom, and practices of love in your creation. In whatever ways we still struggle to accept and celebrate our own unique offerings, free us from narrow thinking that confines, constrains, or condemns your good work in us. Comfort, heal, and protect all queer people around the earth that are vulnerable, threatened, or afraid. Shield and protect them, O God. Holy Wisdom, come, liberate all of us, heal us of our iniquities. We long for your truth that sets the captives free. Bring us your word that liberates. Quiet all that turns us against ourselves, one another, or any of your creatures in creation. Lead us in a love that mends and restores.
Way